Welcome to Focus on the Candidates. My guest today is Jordan Herrera, and he's running,
Missouri's
yes,
fifth.
Missouri. And he is going to talk about redistricting. So, Jordan, the big thing, like when you hear about redistricting, you hear about California. What's going on in Missouri?
Right. So here in Missouri, President Trump, in an effort to ensure that the Republican Party holds the majority in the Congress after the midterms, the president has sought out a plan targeting Texas and Missouri initially to alter our maps, redraw them in a way that it fundamentally changes the landscape. For example, here in our state, we are a 60-40 split state, meaning 60% of our electorate votes Republican and about 40% votes Democratic. In our state right now, we hold 8 congressional seats, and only 2 of which are democratically held. So we're already living under the effects of gerrymandering and partisan gerrymandering more specifically. Now, moving forward with the gerrymandering argument and fight, we have to determine what is our cause of action and how are we going to move forward. Personally, I have already drafted my brief and sent it over to an attorney, and we're ready to execute on filing and suing, seeking an injunction against this map until it can be determined later what the courts have decided.
So, how do you feel about gerrymandering? I assume you don't like it, but it seems like the maps by the people that are in office, they want to draw the maps in a way that would keep them in office securely. And do you think that's good or do you think that's bad?
No. Okay. So with gerrymandering, do I think it's a good thing or a bad thing? Well, I'm going to give you the lawyer answer. It depends. So the
Okay.
reason why I'm saying it depends is because gerrymandering, what we're talking about with gerrymandering is first, the process of gerrymandering is not necessarily illegal. Gerrymander describes the shape of the district. It
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily imply the action. It's when we attach partisan gerrymandering or racial gerrymandering that we get the action. So gerrymandering by itself is intended to keep a politically cohesive group contiguous, meaning it has to be connected, all connected with one another. So in some districts, you'll see these weird snake shapes, and that's why you get this salamander. And the gentleman who was doing this at the time, his last name was Jerry, Gerry. And so he had the salamander district, so it was gerrymandered. That's where it comes from. So
Yeah.
not all gerrymandering is bad. Sometimes we do it to keep people who vote in a block together, and that allows for them to vote for a candidate of their choice. It's when the gerrymandering is done in a way that deprives the voter of an equal vote or an equal voice. In our country, we believe in one person equals one vote. That is what we strive for in election and campaign finance law.
Mhm.
So what we see now under these new maps that are partisan gerrymandered, if we're going in that argument, which is what the Trump administration has said, this is intended to benefit the Republican Party. So when we look at it, Rucho versus Common Cause is a Supreme Court case that was decided in 2019. And in Rucho, they discuss that partisan gerrymandering is a non-justiciable issue, meaning the court cannot provide a relief. And it's because judges can't draw congressional maps. They don't have the experience or training to do so. And since the court cannot provide relief, it won't hear the case. Now, here's how this one's different. Yes, it's still partisan gerrymandering, but Rucho versus Common Cause was decided upon a state drawing its own districts to benefit a party. Here, in this particular one, it's different because the Trump administration, the president and his administration have already drawn the map for the state of Missouri. So this is the intrusion of the executive department into the state's congressional districts. That's why this is different. That's why the federal courts should hear this case despite Rucho versus Common Cause. This one
Um,
really distinguishes why it should be heard.
do you think a lot of people realize that it's up to the state legislature to draw the maps for Congress?
No, I think that is a great question. So thank you. When it comes to the varying levels of government, a lot of folks don't really know where to parse out where things lie. For example, drawing the districts is left to the states, and it comes from the 10th Amendment under the reserve powers. The reserve powers are anything that is not explicitly or inferred or implied by the Constitution are reserved to the states. One of those powers is the power to conduct and hold elections. That's a state's reserved power. And so, for the executive administration to violate the 10th Amendment, to also violate the separation of powers, meaning the executive branch into a legislative body here at a state level, we have a lot of problems going on. So, that's just another way in which I have already, in my brief, I filed or I've drafted that we are positing a 10th Amendment argument as well, based off of what I had just mentioned. Now, I should also mention as a candidate, my rights are violated differently than the voter base. The voter base has a different set of rights. They are being deprived of their First Amendment speech rights because they are unable to hear the candidates who are running for their district. And at the same time, the candidates' First Amendment rights are also being violated because they're unable to share their message with the congressional district they filed to run in. Now, because of this change, so many people will not know what district they're in, who they should be voting for. And just one other wrinkle to throw in there, Missouri has a requirement that you must register to vote in your district 6 months prior to the election, or your vote does not count.
Mhm.
So with this happening now in September, we also need to factor that into play, meaning if you plan on voting in the primary in August of next year, this needs to be resolved by February for it to take effect. Now, if it's not, then it should go onto the ballot and we should vote on it as a state next year. But it shouldn't come into effect now.
So in Missouri, you're from Missouri. Do you miss Claire?
I do. Claire McCaskill was a fantastic senator. I miss her a lot. I've tried to reach out to her team. I know she's no longer necessarily in politics as running as a candidate necessarily, but I would love her support and help any way I could get it.
Wow. So I did not introduce what you're running for, or, tell us a little bit about what made you decide to run for Congress.
That's a great question. So, yes, I'm running for United States Congress to represent Missouri's 5th congressional district. Um, so why I've decided to run, and I have been redrawn into this new map into the 4th district. So regardless, I'm not losing any steam. I'm still very much committed to the fight, and here's why. Over the last decade, we have seen Democrats leave our party. Young people are not registering for our party. We've lost $5 to $7 million as a party in this state alone, and we've actually shrunk in demographics here. So that's a problem. And I have to look at, well, what's the reasoning or what could be a possible solution to fix this? Well, we need more involvement on the ground level. People who are ready to energize the base, to get out and talk to young people to get them motivated into politics. I'll give an example. Every Democrat meeting I go to, someone says, "Where are all the young people at?" I've gone back to them and said, "Okay, if you want me to bring out young people, what do you have for them to do?" And there is no opportunities for them. They just want them there. Well, that's how my campaign is different. In my campaign, we've reached out to young people and we brought them on board with the campaign, not to just be volunteers and work for us, but to show them the way. This is how you run a campaign, and this is how you run as a candidate. So we're giving them that education now. We're showing them how to set up their own races. So when they get of age and they want to run for office, they don't have to worry about candidate training or paying thousands of dollars to learn how to set all of this infrastructure up. They already have the tool set, and this campaign is doing it without charging tuition, without gatekeeping. But I believe we are doing it the right way. This is how we get young people invested and involved, because I know from my time as a military member teaching young people for 16 years, I did this. I know when you plant a seed in a young person's mind, give it 5 to 10 years, and that tree will be so big and so beautiful. It's going to provide so much shade for so many people. But if we're not giving folks an opportunity to get started, they're not going to show up.
So I want to call them entrenched politicians.
Yes.
Are they embracing young people coming into politics today?
I will give an honest answer. It's strange. Okay, so across the country, we hear things like we're tired of octogenarians and septuagenarians in office because it provides a liability. Here's the liability: three folks in their 70s have died in office since last November. All three are Democrats. All three being deceased means that the big tax bill, that blunder that moved through the House, the only reason why it happened is because we didn't have all of our party members there. So if Democrats really want to be honest, we have to accept that this would not have succeeded had we elected the right people to be in office. And I'm not saying any of those deceased congressmen have done anything improper or wrong. I'm simply arguing that there was one gentleman who had stage 4 cancer when he was reelected. That's a liability. And if we're not thinking things through, Americans will get hurt. And of course, now that we have this tax bill under the Trump administration, yeah, Americans are definitely getting hurt because of it. So we have to be smarter about who we're electing. And I've said this also to every Democrat because in my district, there is a legacy establishment Democrat, an incumbent in office who's been there for 20 years.
At
I said
least
to folks, go ahead.
at least 20 years.
At least 20 years,
Mm.
a little over, you're right. And the thing that I've said back to everyone is, first, Congress is not a retirement program. If you love your congressman, that's great. If you believe they deserve the chance to retire when they're ready, that's great. But if they are challenged in a primary, that doesn't mean we don't respect elderly. It just means that they should have retired with dignity before, and they are refusing to do so now. So at this point, we don't want to see Americans get hurt. In my district, for example, our congressman has never advocated for the LGBTQ or women's reproductive access. I cannot sit idly by and allow this person to go back into Congress knowing people like myself will not have an advocate for 2 or 4 years. And asking LGBTQ folks or women to wait 2 or 4 years to get a candidate who will actually fight for them is wrong. It is tantamount to a death sentence. And if you don't believe me, talk to a trans person.
What do you think is the most important issues in your district?
Right now, the most important issue is maintaining our voice in Congress. That is the biggest issue right now, is a redistricting fight. I brought up that, I can file in a partisan gerrymandering way. I can also file in a racial gerrymandering way by doing the research and looking at how many of a minority bloc are left in the respective districts after it's been cracked apart.
Mhm.
And does the opposing, or not opposing, does the other majority, meaning Caucasian individuals, do they vote in such a way that it will drown out or dilute or silence the voices of minority voters in their new respective districts? That will be hard to prove and it'll be hard to show, but there's ways to do it. And if we're committed, we can get that done. So redistricting is the number one. Number two is housing affordability. In my district right now, and this is me as a practicing attorney, I could not afford a house as a disabled and retired airman. I have that income. On top of my income as an attorney, I could not buy a house for less than $350,000 that wasn't built before 1990 at the earliest date. I've been
Mhm.
saying 1980, but I do believe I saw one that was built in 86
Mhm.
recently that was within that price range. But the point remains, unless you're willing to spend $350,000 on a home that's already 30 to 40 years old, you're out of luck. So for me, housing is the number two. I think number three, though, of all of these issues, what's affecting our district, is probably just having the right representation in office.
Mhm.
Now we're not immune. The rest of the country feels this as well. In among Democrats, we only have about a 30% approval rating internally. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has around a 37, 38 approval rating. That's pretty sad. Further, if we look at our own internal polling, 64% of registered Democrats agree that we need new congressional leaders. So for folks to think that we're not affected by the same things that are affecting the country, they are refusing to take off the rose-colored glasses. For me,
Hmm.
that's the only way to win this fight. We have to take those glasses off. We have to throw our playbook out and we have to write a new playbook.
Now, would you, within the top five, would you say that the the fact that we're very, very close to a nuclear holocaust in this world, has that entered into your campaign at all?
Maybe not necessarily focused directly on nuclear arms, but you bring up a great point of growing escalation globally. So for me, that is a part of my campaign messaging. I don't believe in warfare endlessly. That's not what we should be doing. I served my country for 16 years. I have an undergraduate degree in military history, focusing on battle and strategy. What I believe is war is the last diplomatic measure when all other diplomatic measures have already failed. I don't believe that we are at that place as a nation. We should be using our State Department and their resources primarily before the Department of Defense. Unfortunately, under this administration, and even by his own rhetoric, calling the department now Department of War, that should tell everyone what his perspectives are. That should inform everyone on where he sees this country moving. He sees war in our future. I don't. There is no reason for that. Um, Again, we just spent nearly 2 decades in war, and I have to question and wonder what was the result. Are we
Right.
a more secure or sovereign nation than we were before? To some degree, but I think that's also on our own part. We're safer and more secure because we did that ourselves. Americans refortified our own defenses. We don't need to be executing or exacting war throughout the world to increase our own security.
I don't think that, but I think that Biden had an endless war philosophy also, right?
Oh, I would agree. Yes. And I think, you're bringing up a great point of we have to be willing to hold the mirror of scrutiny up to both sides of the aisle. We
Mhm.
will never move forward unless we deal with the reality, what it is. And if we're just going to scapegoat and say, oh, the Trump administration are war hawks, but the Biden administration was completely fine is a lie. The Biden administration was very much involved in funding weapons and bombs that went over into Gaza. We need to hold our allies to the same standard we hold ourselves to. And so when we see our allies committing war crimes and genocide, we need to call them out and stop funding those wars and ammunitions.
Mhm. So, as a candidate, if you're elected, what unique quality will you bring to the table?
So as a candidate, when I'm elected, I bring to the table trauma informed legislation. So, what trauma informed legislation is my doctrine on, and it mirrors my two disciplines. I was a biomedical engineer for the United States Air Force, I worked in healthcare. I've also spent a great deal of time in mental health, supporting not only my own mental health and recovery from combat service, but also other veterans as well. So trauma informed comes from that area of my life, and the legislative part obviously comes from my legal background. So what I bring to the fight with trauma informed legislation is I look at the secondary and tertiary effects of laws that are already existing, and we make sure that we don't commit those same harms again. I'll give an example of DADT. It was put into place, don't ask, don't tell, by the Clinton administration in the 1990s because they wanted to protect LGBT service members so they could serve their country, but they wouldn't be pressured to disclose who they are. Now, the unintended consequence of this meant that it was used as a vehicle to kick out service members and they would lose their financial livelihood. Trauma informed legislation is the doctrine that says we're going to look at these sort of laws and how they've had unintended secondary or even tertiary effects that negatively impact people. And by learning from those examples, we don't do it again. We think about who will be affected positively, negatively. Is this the outcome that we want? And if it's not, how can we put in guardrails? So that's one thing. Second thing that I bring to the fight that's different than my opponents is on one end, we have Emmanuel Cleaver, who's been in office since 2005. And while I respect him as a congressman and as a leader, as a reverend, he doesn't advocate for all pockets of the population. That's wrong. Furthermore, he's been in office for 20 years. I mentioned our number two issue is housing affordability. He's a senior member on the housing committee. If I can't afford a house in his own district and he's a senior member of that committee, I have a problem with that. How
Mhm.
well is your advocacy? And I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just wondering, where is the energy at? The other
And he's
factor in
over
there,
80.
yes, he's over 80. Exactly. And I'm not an ageist person by any means, but let's also recognize that at a certain age, you're unable to do the same things that people in their 30s and 40s can get done. It's just a reality. So I think, you know, when we're looking at how I'm different than my opponents, that's one thing. I bring energy, vitality. I'm reigniting the base. In fact, Missouri Missouri Next Generation Politics have voted overwhelmingly statewide to endorse me. And they're a group of high school and college age Democrats statewide that believe in this campaign because, again, with the other candidates, they can talk about building a coalition. I'm the one who's actually doing it. They can talk about mentoring. I'm the one who's actually doing it. They can ask, where are the young people? Well, they're right here. They're on this campaign, and I gave them jobs to help them succeed. So that's how we're standing out. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have another gentleman who's very young. He's never been involved in the political world or government or any of that sort, which is not a bad thing. But it also means that he's not really well informed. It also means that he has made some violations. And he's kind of, not really well polished enough yet, in my opinion. He's a good person, don't get me wrong, but when it comes to working across the aisle, which is what you will have to do, I don't think he's got it. I don't think he's got the policy. I don't think he's got the time. Um, so, to sum it up, how I'm different, we don't need a reverend or a preacher, and we also don't need a social media activist and influencer. What we do need is someone who can develop results based policies and plans and speak to them in a way that is common sense, that lay people can understand, and also develop and bring people along. That's what you get with me as a candidate. That's how I'm different.
So, how has the fundraising been going?
Fundraising has been a challenge, that is for sure. This is a grassroots campaign. So I've made a commitment to not accept corporate PAC dollars. And what that really requires then is I need to speak to as many constituents and voters as possible. And that means I have to rely on $5 donations instead of $5,000 donations. Now, it is possible, but it means that I'm just going to have to be committed to the work and getting out there to talk to as many people as possible. Here's how I get that done. Every day, I call voters for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours in the morning and afternoon. I usually get through about 65 to 120 calls per day, but it just depends on how long people talk and how the conversation's going, and if they have genuine concerns and issues that they want to bring forward. I also go to every Democratic Club meeting that's out there. It doesn't matter if you're with the Democratic Socialists or if you're with the Blue Springs Democrats. I will come out, visit you, and get to know you so I can be a better advocate and representative for you moving forward. But I've also been invited out to conservative spaces. I've been invited to conservative houses, and that's a difference maker between me as a Democrat and my opponents and whatnot, is that I'm not afraid to go into these traditionally conservative spaces. I've served my military. I worked in the Missouri Attorney General's office, and I grew up in Nebraska. My life has been surrounded by conservative voices. So when it comes to how do we talk to people across the aisle and build a bridge and make things work, that's how I know how to get it done. I've been doing it my whole life.
So, has the party been supportive of you?
The party in general, yes, they have been supportive. Of course, the Missouri Democratic Party cannot get involved in, the primary. They can't choose a candidate. And frankly, I respect that. The party overwhelmingly has been more invested and involved. minus, generations that I would say are 65 and above and predominantly white females, 65 and above, are the only group that I have struggles with. And I'm not sure why that is. I think it's because, in our district, we've had a black congressman for quite some time.
Right.
And it's members of this group that seem to think that
Mhm.
Hispanic people maybe can't speak to adversity or race dialogue, but we absolutely can. And moreover, in our state here in Missouri, we've never had a Hispanic or Latino person hold federal office. I think sending a Hispanic or a Latino person into office this year, a year when Trump is trying to target Hispanic and Latino communities by hunting us down in our schools, churches, and gyms, this sends a message back to that administration that you cannot intimidate any corner of the American populace.
The the media, how are you dealing with the media? Do you use your own social media more than
I
relying on the mainstream media?
Absolutely, I do. So I have a larger following on TikTok and through social media. So for me, that's how I can absolutely get my message out very quickly. We have a robust email and text messaging campaign as well. So we reach out to voters that way. But with the mainstream media, it has been difficult to get any kind of traction or attention. I think in part that's because they are very much a part of the establishment machine. That's something I've noticed this election cycle is that um, it's really frustrating running against an incumbent because they mention the incumbent as the owner or holder of the district. So when Trump is launching this fight against Missouri's fifth, the way the media describes it is they're coming after Emmanuel Cleaver's seat. Well, no, they're not. They're not coming after his seat because, well, he hasn't really been present in Congress. So we know it's not that. They're coming after this seat because our legislator has left it and it's become vulnerable.
Mm.
If our legislators were back in district, building the base, raising the party, we wouldn't be in this situation. We're here, though, because our incumbent has not been doing that work. So when it comes to the mainstream media, I do get frustrated because they want to say it's his district, but he hasn't been working for this district. So let's be honest about that. It's not his district. It is the district that belongs to the Missouri's fifth constituency and the people who live in the Missouri's fifth congressional district.
So do you think that candidates who use social media will change the paradigm?
Well, I hope so. I think that's what's necessary, especially if we are trying to get money out of politics and we're trying to restore trust, transparency, and accountability. What I love about Gen Z and young people, millennials included, who are using social media in a new, completely new way, right? We've seen major news networks like CNN now have to go to a paid for subscription because you don't have to get your news from CNN. You can get it through these medium formats, whether it's on Facebook or TikTok or social media. Yes, it is changing the game. And I'll give a clear example how. I've recognized that I need to answer young people in the first 10 seconds or that I will lose them. It's a product of social media. In the first 10 seconds of a TikTok video, if you don't have that hook that's going to capture young people, you're going to miss out on them entirely. So, if we're really paying attention to how young people are getting their information, digesting it, then we need to also communicate in a way that they are used to. So, you need to be communicating basically in public like it's TikTok. Give an answer in the first 10 seconds, give your rationale in the next 30, and then move on because attention spans are shorter. People want their information faster and they don't want to hunt and fight for it.
So have you ever run for office before?
I have not. And that's what is a benefit to me. And here's why. I am a member of a party that believes in we do not need career politicians, right? We don't want that. So when people tell me to wait my turn in line and pay my political dues, I just send them back with, did President Obama wait his turn in line or did he run for president while he was in his first term as a senator?
Mm.
Okay, yeah, he never had to wait in line, and he's one of our best presidents in American history. Did Winston Churchill wait in line? Absolutely not. He stood up because he's a leader and he said, I know how to get this done. So I don't need to wait in line. I don't need to hold a political office before this. And here's another reason why it's important. I don't need politicians who've been bought and sold from the local level to the state level to finally get to the federal level. Because by that point, I don't know who you're really working for. I think you're probably working for your own career interests and not the people. So I'd rather vote for a veteran who knows how to put service before self, who wants to go into office and is running on term limits. And that's on my website. I've made that commitment and pledge to get things done and to then mentor and train the next generation, like I also am doing, and bring those people into office to replace me. That's how it should be done.
Are you having fun doing all this?
Oh my gosh. This has been the most exciting part of my life, and I've done a lot of exciting things, but I am loving this. I have to be honest and say I can't predict the outcome of the election. But what I can do for sure is make sure that I'm doing the most good work during this campaign, during this election, as I can. So, how I'm changing things for how to run. We are teaching young people along the way. I mentioned that. I'm hosting a free firearm policy clinic that'll last for 6 weeks this fall, open to any college or high school student, nonpartisan. And what I am doing is teaching them how to break apart policy, put it back together, and then run on that issue. So, literally giving them every tool that they need on how to be a politician themselves, they are getting it. And when it comes to that particular thing, I'll be running on that firearm policy as a congressional representative or candidate. And then these young people are going to be moving that policy forward in state legislature next session to try and get reasonable, smart, common sense background checks and firearm restriction in place. That's how we do this. You can't just tell people, young people to show up. You have to show them the way, and you have to be willing to put in the sweat equity to do it. And if you're not doing that, then don't call yourself a leader either, because only mentors lead.
If your fairy godmother came down and gave you a magic wand today and said you had one wish for politics, what would that
Okay.
wish be?
My wish would be to restore the American system such that a single parent could afford to buy a house and feed her children and send them to school without worry. That is what I would change in on day one, given any wish, that a single parent could afford a house on their own, their children, and to be able to send those children to college without worry. That is my one wish.
Mm.
If we get America back to that way of life, back to a single income household, and you can afford it, that's what we should be striving for. Right now, we live in an America where you need 2 or 4 incomes to just live comfortably.
Hmm.
That's the problem with capitalism as it is right now. Capitalism has met its cap. We need to bring down the cost of American way of life.
I want to tell all your listeners, all our listeners right now, um, mark their calendar, um, August 1st, 2026. I'm creating a holiday called National Candidate Recognition Day. The 250th anniversary birthday of America is July 4th. Why not why not recognize all the people that worked hard to make sure we had a 250th um birthday? So I'm creating National Candidate Recognition Day, and if anybody is interested in helping me do so, can email me at localeverywhere@aol.com. Thank you. Thanks, Jordan, and it was a pleasure talking with you. I hope we talk again. Final thoughts.
Yeah, so my final thoughts are this. For Democrats, politics is a contact sport. Democrats need to understand politics is a contact sport. It demands participation. The other thing that I need folks to understand, that if you are a person of courage, I call myself a person of courage. To me, this is the definition. If you're a person of courage, you see the lamplight of truth and justice, and you pick that lamp up with the knowledge, knowing with a certainty, you will experience the fire. You will be burned. But that torch is important because you lead people behind you. So it's important, regardless of how bad the burn is, you pick up the torch, you light the way, and you start walking the path and lead people along the way. If Democrats are unable to be courageous, and what I mean by this is, are we going out and talking to law enforcement, to veterans, to farmers, to people that we've lost from our party, Hispanic men and women, Black men? Are we ready to go out there and make sure that they understand that this is the party for them and here's why? Are we ready to go to the Teamsters and union leaders and go back to them and say, this is the party for labor and working people, and this is why? And why I bring that up as an act of courage, because Democrats have not been doing that. We need to be courageous again and get out there, have difficult conversations, healthy confrontation, and be able to move and advance the agenda forward. We have to be fearless in our advocacy, and we should not acquiesce a single point. The other thing, we need to drop the Trump language that is coming out of Democrats' mouths. If you notice, I don't talk like him. I don't use his language. Even when I describe the tax bill, I do not use his words. There's a purpose for that. Because when you sound like your enemy, you're not going to defeat your enemy. I've learned that in the courtroom, that if you want to win your argument, you don't use your opponent's talking points. You frame your own argument, you frame your own language, and you make the other side look either inferior or that it has like a weaker analytical standpoint for whatever purpose or reason. So, applying that same logic, as Democrats today, we need to use our own arguments and not keep sounding like Trump parrots.
Thank you. So
Yeah.
you've been listening to Jordan Herrera. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Focus on the Candidates. If you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks, Jordan. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.